I grew up in northern Pennsylvania, in a small town called Wellsboro. If you know anything about places like that, you know hunting isn't just a hobby, it's part of life. Every year when rifle season started, schools would literally shut down because half the town would be out in the woods before sunrise. My dad got me into hunting when I was about 12, and by the time I was 23, I preferred going alone. Just me, the woods, and the silence. But after what happened in November of 2021, I don't hunt alone anymore. It was late archery season, and there was already a thin layer of snow covering the ground, just enough to show tracks clearly. I had permission to hunt on a private property owned by a guy my dad knew from work. It was about 70 acres of dense woods with an old logging trail cutting through it and a small clearing near the entrance. Deep in the property, there was an abandoned hunting cabin. I had seen it before. The roof was starting to collapse, and no one had used it in years. At least that's what I believed. That morning, I got there around 5:15 a.m. It was still completely dark. I parked near a rusted gate like I always did, grabbed my gear, and started walking in with my headlamp lighting the path ahead. Right away, something felt off. The woods were too quiet. No wind, no distant animals, nothing. Just silence. About halfway to my stand, I got this strange feeling like I was being watched. It wasn't a sound or anything I could point to, just a feeling. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just being alone in the dark messing with my head. I climbed into my tree stand about 20 feet up and waited for daylight. About an hour after sunrise, I noticed something that didn't belong. About 60 yards away, partially hidden between trees, was another ladder stand. I froze. I had hunted this property multiple times, and that stand had never been there before. It looked old and worn, like it had been sitting somewhere for years. But I knew for a fact it hadn't been there the previous weekend. Then I saw the footprints. There was a single trail of tracks in the snow coming from deep in the woods, straight to the base of that stand. No other tracks, no signs of anyone leaving. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Maybe someone else had permission to hunt there, I told myself. Around 8 a.m., I saw movement near the stand. At first, I thought it was a deer, but then a person stepped into view. He was standing behind a tree, wearing a dirty gray hoodie and dark pants, not camo. He wasn't moving, just standing there looking directly in my direction. At first, I couldn't tell if he saw me, but then he slowly raised his hand and waved. It didn't feel friendly, more like he was just letting me know he saw me. I hesitated but gave a small wave back. After about a minute, he stepped behind the tree. I expected him to walk out the other side, but he didn't. I waited, but he never came out. No footsteps, no sound, nothing. Just silence again. Around 10 a.m., I climbed down, trying to convince myself I was overthinking things. I walked toward where I saw him, and when I reached the tree, my stomach dropped. The snow around it was completely undisturbed except for my own footprints. There were no tracks leading away. I followed the original trail of footprints, and they led straight to the ladder stand and stopped. I looked up, expecting maybe he climbed it, but it was empty. The seat had a thin layer of snow that hadn't been disturbed. On my way back, I noticed something tied to a branch, a strip of orange fabric like part of a hunting vest. Then I saw another one, and another. They were spaced out, tied at different heights, like someone had marked something intentionally. That was the first moment I thought about leaving. Around noon, I went back to my truck to eat and warm up. I sat there longer than usual, staring at the tree line. I almost left, but I didn't. I convinced myself I was just overthinking it. I went back into the woods around 2 p.m. to sit until dark. About an hour before sunset, I heard slow footsteps behind me. They were too heavy and spaced out to be an animal. I turned slowly, and about 30 yards behind my stand, I saw him again. The same man. This time he was closer. I could see his face clearly. His skin looked pale, his beard was patchy and dirty, like he hadn't taken care of himself in a long time. He was smiling, but not in a normal way, just barely showing his teeth. In his right hand, he was holding something. At first I thought it was a stick, but then I saw the yellow and black handle. It was a screwdriver. He didn't say anything. He just stood there staring at me. I asked if he had permission to be there, but he didn't respond. After about 10 seconds, he slowly turned and walked into the trees. That should have been the moment I left, but I didn't. I stayed until shooting light ended. Right after sunset, I climbed down and started walking back quickly. The woods felt different now, heavier. About halfway to my truck, I started seeing the orange strips again, but this time they were tied to sticks in the ground. Then I saw something hanging from one of them. It was a dead squirrel strung up by wire. Underneath it, a rough circle had been drawn in the snow. Then I saw more. A rabbit, a crow, all hung the same way like markers or warnings. I started walking faster. About 100 yards from my truck, I saw something leaning against a tree that made me stop completely. It was my backpack, the one I had left in my tree stand earlier that day. It was open, and my belongings were laid out neatly in the snow. My knife, my flashlight, my arrows, all arranged like someone had gone through everything. That's when it hit me. He had been at my stand, close enough to climb it, close enough to watch me. I grabbed my stuff and ran. When I reached the clearing, my truck door was open. I always lock it. Nothing was missing, but my registration papers were sitting on the passenger seat. I got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. Then I looked in the mirror. He was there, standing at the edge of the woods, watching me. He raised his hand, but instead of waving, he pointed at me and slowly dragged his finger across his throat. I drove out of there as fast as I could. Later, I told the property owner everything, and he said no one else had permission to be there. 2 weeks later, he called my dad and said officers found a makeshift shelter deep in the woods, made from tarps and old wood. Inside, they found animal bones and stolen hunting gear from other properties. I never went back. I don't hunt alone anymore. Because out there in the woods, you might think you're alone, but sometimes, something has been watching you the entire time. Kyle had been asking Connor and me to go hunting with him for almost 2 years, and every single time we brushed it off. Neither of us knew anything about hunting, and honestly, it was never something I was interested in. Kyle, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. He was one of those guys who actually knew how to survive out there. He could gut a deer like it was nothing, split wood without struggling, start a fire without any help, and somehow sleep on the ground like it was a normal bed. Connor and I were not those kinds of guys. We liked the idea of a hunting trip, sitting around drinking beer in the mountains, telling stories and getting away from everything. But the reality of hiking miles into the woods, waking up before sunrise and killing an animal didn't appeal to us at all. Eventually, though, Kyle convinced us. It was late November, rifle season was open, and he said the cold would keep the bugs away. He also promised a quiet spot deep in the mountains where he had hunted before and almost never saw anyone else. Honestly, what sold us was the idea of drinking and eating in the middle of nowhere. So we agreed. The plan was simple. We'd leave Friday morning, hike in, set up camp, and spend the weekend hunting. Connor was in because he'd agree to anything if it sounded like a good story later. I agreed because I didn't want to be the only one still saying no. And if I'm honest, I didn't want to miss out. We loaded up Kyle's truck before sunrise and drove a few hours into the mountains. The entire drive, Kyle talked us through everything like we were in some kind of beginner survival class. He showed us how to safely carry rifles, how to walk quietly through the woods, what deer tracks looked like, and how to notice trails that Connor and I would have completely missed. When we finally parked near an old logging road, we grabbed our gear and started hiking. Kyle said it was only a couple of miles, but it felt way longer. By the time we reached the spot he picked, my legs were burning and my shoulders felt like they were about to fall off. We set up camp near a small creek on a flat patch of ground. Kyle did most of the work while Connor and I struggled to be useful. By nightfall, we had tents up, a fire going, and logs set around it to sit on. That first night actually felt perfect. The woods were quiet except for the crackling fire and the sound of water moving over rocks. We were drinking, laughing, talking about old memories, and making fun of Connor for messing up the tent setup. It was one of those rare moments where everything just felt right. Then we heard it. A scream. It came from somewhere deep in the woods, far enough away that it sounded distant, but clear enough that it stopped all of us mid-conversation. Kyle tilted his head, listening carefully, while Connor nervously laughed and said it sounded like a woman being attacked. Kyle said it was probably a fox, explaining that foxes can make sounds that sound like screaming. I wanted to believe him. I really did. Because whatever we heard didn't sound like an animal to me. At first, it was easy to ignore because it was so far away. After a minute or two, we started talking again, but none of us were fully relaxed anymore. We kept pausing, listening. Then about 5 minutes later, the scream came again. This time it was much closer. Close enough that all conversations stopped immediately. It sounded exactly like a woman screaming, long and drawn out, then suddenly cutting off. Connor stood up and stared into the darkness beyond the firelight. Kyle stood up too. Without thinking, Connor called out, asking if someone needed help. I told him that was a terrible idea, and then we all just stood there waiting for a response. Nothing came, just silence. Kyle looked uneasy now. He said if it was a person, they would have answered. Then he told us to put out the fire and get into the tents. He didn't need to explain why. The fire was basically a signal showing exactly where we were. We put it out quickly and climbed into our tents with our rifles nearby. I barely slept that night. Every little noise made my heart race. When I finally woke up, it was cold and gray outside. I stepped out of the tent and immediately noticed something was off. Our chairs were knocked over, one of the coolers had been moved, and a bag of snacks was torn open and dragged across the ground. Kyle's backpack had been moved from where it had been the night before. I called for him and Connor, and they came out looking just as confused. Kyle said it was probably a bear. It made sense. We hadn't stored food properly, and animals are drawn to that. But the strange part was that nothing was really missing. Everything was just moved. Still, we accepted his explanation because it was the easiest one. We decided to move camp deeper into the woods. The new spot felt more isolated, surrounded by thicker trees on a slope. We spent most of the day hunting. Kyle eventually shot a deer, and we dragged it back to camp. Watching him skin and process it was rough for me. I've always been an animal lover, and seeing it up close like that wasn't easy. But Kyle was completely in his element, explaining everything like it was normal. That night we drank again, trying to relax. Kyle even cooked some of the meat over the fire, and I'll admit, it tasted good. For a moment, things felt normal again. Then the scream came back. This time it was distant at first, but we all recognized it instantly. Nobody joked. Nobody said fox. We just listened. A few minutes later it came again, closer, and it sounded like it was moving toward us. Kyle grabbed his rifle. He tried to stay calm, but I could hear the tension in his voice. Then suddenly, he fired a few shots into the air and started yelling into the woods, trying to scare whatever it was. Connor and I laughed at first, mostly out of nervousness and the alcohol. But that laughter stopped quickly when the scream came again, even closer than before. It sounded like it was right at the edge of camp. We put out the fire immediately, plunging everything into darkness. We got into our tents, completely silent. I lay there, wide awake, listening to every sound. Then I heard it. Footsteps, running. Fast, heavy footsteps circling the tents. Something brushed against my tent, like an object dragging across the fabric. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. Then everything went silent. And suddenly, the scream exploded right in the middle of the campsite. It was so loud it didn't sound human anymore. Connor screamed. I yelled without thinking. Then Kyle fired a shot straight through the top of his tent into the air. The noise was deafening. Immediately after, I heard something running away through the woods, crashing through branches, getting farther and farther until there was nothing. None of us moved for a few seconds. Then Kyle called out, asking if we were okay. We all answered. He told us to get into one tent. We didn't argue. The three of us sat there with rifles and flashlights, barely speaking. Hours passed like that. When morning finally came, the campsite looked disturbed, but not destroyed. A few things were knocked over. Some items had been moved, but nothing was taken. We packed up immediately and left without even discussing staying another night. The hike out felt different. We talked more, probably to distract ourselves. By the time we reached the truck, the fear had turned into nervous laughter. We even joked about it. But deep down, none of us had answers. To this day, I still think about those screams. Part of me wonders if it was just some person messing with us, but another part of me keeps asking one question. What if it really was someone out there, and we chose to hide instead of helping? I don't get to see my grandpa very often. He owns his own business, and most of his time is spent working. So when he called me last November and asked if I wanted to go on a hunting trip with him in Crockett, Texas, I didn't even hesitate. I said yes immediately. Truth is, I've never really been into hunting, but I do love camping. I love being out in the middle of nowhere, away from people, exploring places I've never seen before. And I had never been to this hunting lease he was talking about. So for me, it wasn't really about hunting. It was about spending time with him and getting out into the woods. Looking back now, I wish I had just stayed home. We arrived late in the afternoon. The entrance to the property wasn't what I expected. There was no proper road or sign, just a narrow dirt path leading off the side of a highway, blocked by an old iron gate. My grandpa got out, lifted it open, and we drove through. As soon as we passed the gate, everything changed. The noise of the highway disappeared almost instantly, replaced by thick silence. Trees surrounded us on both sides as we drove deeper down the dirt road. It felt like we were leaving the normal world behind. After a few minutes, we reached a clearing. In the middle of it sat an old house. It looked like something frozen in time. As we parked, my grandpa told me his father had built it decades ago. It was used as a place to hunt, relax, and get away from everything. I could understand why. The place was quiet, peaceful, almost too quiet. We unloaded the truck, brought our gear inside, and made dinner. The house was old but functional. There were worn-out beds, a dusty TV with a VCR, and an ancient stove that looked like it hadn't been replaced in decades. It felt like stepping into the past. That night, we went to sleep early, around 8:30, so we could wake up before sunrise. As I was lying in bed, just starting to drift off, I heard something. A scratching sound. It was coming from one of the windows. At first, I assumed it was just a branch or maybe an animal brushing against the screen. The woods are full of noises like that, so I ignored it, and eventually, I fell asleep. The next morning, my grandpa woke me up before dawn. We got dressed, grabbed our gear, and headed out to one of the hunting blinds. The clearing in front of the blind stretched out for what felt like miles. Beyond it was a thick tree line. We sat there for hours. Nothing. Eventually, we both started to get tired. My grandpa leaned back and closed his eyes. I did the same, but I couldn't sleep. Something didn't feel right. After a few minutes, I grabbed my binoculars and looked toward the tree line, and that's when I saw it. Someone or something standing at the edge of the woods. It was partially hidden behind a tree, peeking, watching us. My heart started pounding. I focused the binoculars, trying to get a better look, but the distance made it hard to make out details. Still, I knew what I saw. It wasn't an animal. I woke my grandpa up immediately. He took the binoculars and looked, and right at that moment, a group of deer walked out into the clearing. He laughed, told me I was just seeing things, said it was probably wildlife. I didn't argue, but I knew what I saw, and it wasn't a deer. About 30 minutes later, he shot one of the deer. We brought it back to the house and started cleaning it. By the time we finished, it was around 3 p.m. We decided to head into town to grab some supplies for dinner, so we hung the deer up outside and left. When we came back, something was wrong. The deer was torn apart. There were deep claw marks across its body, chunks of meat missing, bite marks that didn't look right. My grandpa and I just stood there, staring at it. Neither of us said anything for a few seconds. Then he looked at me and said we were going out again that night. He thought it was coyotes, but I didn't believe that. Something about it didn't feel natural. After dinner, we grabbed flashlights and rifles and headed out into the woods. At first, everything was quiet. We walked and talked for about 45 minutes. Then we got close to the tree line, and I saw it again. The same figure, peeking from behind a tree. The moment it realized I saw it, it disappeared. I didn't yell. I just whistled softly and signaled my grandpa. He told me to stay where I was and watch his back. Then he walked into the woods and disappeared. I stood there alone, listening, waiting. Minutes passed, felt like hours. Then I heard a gunshot. I ran toward the sound. When I found him, he was standing over a dead coyote. Next to it was a mutilated deer. He said the coyote had seen him and looked like it was about to attack. He didn't have a choice. I felt a wave of relief. Maybe that was it. Maybe it really was just animals. Then we heard it. Something moving in the distance. And then a scream. It was the most horrifying sound I've ever heard in my life. It wasn't human, and it wasn't any animal I recognized. We didn't wait to find out. We ran, as fast as we could. Behind us, we heard heavy footsteps, branches snapping, breathing, loud, close, too close. It felt like something was chasing us. We sprinted all the way back to the house, slammed the door, locked everything. Then we heard it outside, scratching, breathing, screeching. Whatever it was right on the other side of the door. It slammed into the house, hard, once, twice. The entire place shook. My grandpa grabbed his rifle and fired through the door. The sound that came after, I'll never forget it. A high-pitched, painful screech. Then silence. Whatever it was ran away. We didn't sleep that night. As soon as we could think straight, I called the police. When a deputy finally arrived, he didn't know what to make of it. We showed him the deer, the tracks, the damage. He looked just as unsettled as we felt. Nothing ever came from that report. No explanation, no answers. But I do know one thing. We never went back to that house again. And whatever was out there that night was not a coyote.